You're listening to the Backyard Tardis Random Thoughts Podcast, part of the Red 5 Network. Hey, it's Nicholas with another Random Thoughts Podcast, Random Thoughts Podcast number 40. If you're new to this podcast, I just talk about my random thoughts. I usually pick a subject of the week or whatever it is. But this week's kind of special. One, we're celebrating a Star Wars Podcast Day. The first Star Wars podcast that is known as Jedi Talk on February 7th, 1999. I think before that it would have been a radio talk show. But that's the first dedicated Star Wars podcast there here. And so February 7th, here we are in 2025. There's Star Wars podcasts galore, but it all started there with Jedi Talk. And of course, very, very big time for Star Wars there at that time. But it's also special in another way. There's been a series that I've been kicking around, wanting to really tell kind of my story with fandoms. And so this is going to be my first in that series of my fandom or my fandom story, Star Wars. So just how I became to enjoy Star Wars. And what a better way to celebrate Star Wars Podcast Day than to tell my journey. Because what's interesting is everybody has a different journey. There's somebody's first exposure to Star Wars is going to be Fortnite. That sounds sacrilegious to say, but that is going to be somebody's introduction to Star Wars or Fall Guys or something, you know. So I think I have one that some people might say is sacrilegious, even though it goes back a lot farther in the fandom. I came into Star Wars during what is often referred to as the dark times. But I don't really think of them as that, because this was when my Star Wars hype was at its highest, is in, you know, what was referred to as the dark times, the dark ages of Star Wars content. But that is when I came into it. And so, you know, going from that to now being part of the Red 5 Network, a network of Star Wars, well, we podcast about all sorts of things, but we all share a love of Star Wars in the Red 5 Network. And so, you know, really where it all started. So for me, it started with Star Tours at Disneyland. So as many people today are really upset that Disney owns Star Wars, for me, my fandom actually starts with Disney.
Now, in a kingdom very, very near.
Art, do hurry. The passengers are boarding.
Prepare yourselves
Welcome aboard.
for the ultimate Disneyland thrill attraction from the imagination of Disney and George Lucas. Because now, the adventure is real. Star Tours at Disneyland. In all the universe, there is no greater thrill. Now open at Disneyland.
January 9th of 87, Star Tours opened, and then in February is when we went. I was 2 years old. So my family had a tradition of going to Disneyland every 2 years in February. Now, that might sound like we have money. Well, one, Disneyland was not expensive back then. Two, my dad's work would hold, he worked for Safeway, and they would hold a corporate event. And so 1 year he would usually do Disneyland, and then the next year he would do like Great America or Marine World. So we would always have that every 2 years. We would go there, we'd get a discount. And one of the things Safeway would do is they'd actually let us in the park a couple hours earlier than the general public. They would rent it out, so only people there were Safeway and Vaughn's employees. So that's how a lot of like these rides, like Star Tours, we got to go on them multiple times before the rest of the people gone into the park. So I was instantly, at 2 years old, just enamored with this thing. I was obsessed with our droids like R2-D2, C-3PO, RX-24, aka Captain Rex, the G2 series, the G2-9T and G247, like those guys are just so funny. And I used to think Short Circuit was somehow related to Star Wars because they look like those guys. So I was obsessed with Short Circuit 2 as a kid. I watched that on repeat. I also saw Captain EO. I was scared of that at 2 years old. But we went back in 2 years. Captain EO was a little less great scary, and I was fascinated by the aliens. But now at 4, I demanded we go on this ride over and over and over again. I became obsessed. I had to start collecting the droids, so every time we went to Disneyland, I had to get a different one of the droids that were Star Tours exclusives. 1 year later, though, I'm at our local video store, and they had, 7 VHS tapes, 7 days, $7. Or, it was like 3 for 3 days for $10 of like new videos. Those were the 2 deals. But my parents used to go in every week. We had a day. We'd get our 7 videos. We'd return the last 7. And I would be allowed to pick out 2 movies from the kids section. So I didn't even look in the rest of the store. All the other stuff, like the action movies, all that stuff that's like the 80s stuff that I'm all into, most of that, either my parents got it or I watched it on TV, edited, or my parents used to buy edited movies from Walmart. Back when Walmart used to do, used to make PG versions of R movies, or PG-13, I should say, of like 80s R movies. And my parents would go there a lot for that. But I went over to the back to the kids section, and what do I find? I see Caravan of Courage and Battle for Endor. And I see right on them the Ewoks. Now, I remembered in the loading screen at Star Tours, they showed some Ewoks getting on. There were posters about Endor and just stuff like that with the Energizer Bunny as you were coming out of Star Tours. And I just went ecstatic. And I just remember running up with both of them and going, Dad, look, they have Star Tours movies. They got Star Tours movies. Because I was, like I said, obsessed with this ride. So my dad let me get them. And I remember really liking Caravan of Courage. Battle for Endor didn't really capture me. So next week, what do you want? Well, Caravan of Courage was back in and I kept doing that. And then, 6 months to a year, I know I was 5 now. By this point, I think my parents got tired of me watching Caravan of Courage. And so then I was able to get Return of the Jedi and A New Hope. And I can't remember which one I watched first. Probably Return of the Jedi because it had Ewoks on the cover, and that's what I knew. But I fell in love with the franchise, over and over and over again. And I know I was 6 before my dad let me watch Empire, but they went and got at Costco a DVD set. I mean, DVD, what am I talking? VHS set of that. Had Empire of Dreams. Later I got, no, that was on the set they got later, but I remember we got that set, and I just started, I had what I called my trilogy of perfect trilogies, as I started getting like 8, 9, Star Wars trilogy, Indiana Jones trilogy, and Back to the Future trilogy, and I would watch those, about 20 minutes of each one of them, every morning before school. I would just go through the series. Occasionally, like I said, I'd throw Short Circuit 2, I'd throw The Lion King in there, Milo and Otis of all things, and some Star Trek films. But like that was kind of my go-to, is I would just cycle through those movies. So now we get to like 91. 91, I'm now 6, and I am at the school library, and one of the things that they had added was an audiobook section, and I go over there and I see Heir to the Empire sitting there, brand new, part of this new section of audiobooks. And what do? I go home and I pop that bad boy in my Teddy Ruxpin, and yes, I hear Teddy Ruxpin spitting out some Thrawn, some Jurius Sabaoth coming in there. Oh man, it's creepy. I actually had to start putting, I used to sleep with this Teddy Ruxpin. Now it was like in the closet at night because it was giving me nightmares hearing those voices, those cold voice of Thrawn, and of course the kind of unhinged voice of Sabaoth coming out of that thing. Fell in love. This got me into the audiobooks. I did the original trilogy adaptation to audio book or audio drama style. Did those, a few others, but and then of course I realized there's books about Star Wars, And so I just made it a habit that I was an avid reader at this time. Like I said, even though we were going to Disneyland and stuff like that, my family was actually pretty poor at the time. We couldn't do with that. Like, I didn't get a lot of things. We went to the library for a lot of this stuff. And I didn't have video games. And so I was an avid reader. I would usually consume 3 books a week on average. And I would do at least 1 Star Wars book a month. I was just going through and consuming them. And so I really got into reading. Like I said, this was my fandom. I remember going to the bookstore in the mall just to read the book that had all the different droids and the one that had all the different spaceships. And I remember one year, because I would just go there and read that, my mom got me as a gift from like this, I think it was through the school fair too, the book that was just all the spaceships. It was meant to be like an encyclopedia of the backstory. I remember reading everything on there. And I'm sorry, I say AT-AT because I read it in the book along with AT-ST, ST, AT-RT. There were just so many in the books that you never even saw in the movies, whether they were from games or comics or whatever. This book had them all. And I immersed myself in this world. Then, some changes started happening in my life. 97, the special editions came out. And you remember the commercial, if this is the only way you've seen Star Wars, then you haven't really seen Star Wars. And that was very true.
For an entire generation, you've only been able to see it on a TV screen. Now, Star Wars is back on the big screen.
There'll be no one to stop us this time.
With newly enhanced visual effects, digital sound, and a few new surprises. Star Wars, the special edition, starts Friday at theaters everywhere. Rated PG.
Now, one of the things I also used to do that drove my parents nuts is, even though they had put over the money to buy from Costco the originally trilogy for me, I would still rent it from Blockbuster and all the best videos and stuff like that, because they had different editions of it. And they had an edition that had the deleted scenes in it. So when we went and saw the special edition and they had that CGI thing with Jabba, I thought that was amazing as a kid at that time. I was maybe 12, 13 at the time. I just thought that was super brilliant. And because I knew that reference, I knew that scene. It didn't make sense, but I knew it, and I loved what they did. In hindsight, not as great on the stuff. I will say everything added to Empire Strikes Back, in my opinion, made that movie better. That is a special edition I love. I prefer the special edition over that. When Return of the Jedi special edition came out, I was super upset. The Ewoks, obviously, were a huge part of my Star Wars fandom. And that was my favorite movie, the scene in Jabba's palace. I just felt like they had gone too far and they had lost the feel of it. It just looked weird to me. But I also, I had a brief period where I was kind of having a negative tone, because right at this time, I had a lot of things going on in my life. 13, I got baptized. I realized I'd gone from this is just my parents' faith to really finding it for myself and making that dedication and making the life goal of becoming a minister when I grew up there at age 13. But shortly after that, my dad's work, we suddenly experienced a period of time where we had money. And because my dad got a promotion, and then that promotion got replaced by a computer program. And so then he lost his job. But it was only temporarily, because then they wanted him to be head of IT support for that and work in the Safeway corporate office and really set up the system. But that required us to move. And I came from a small town, But I moved to an even smaller town. And it's funny, the small town I came from is about the same size today. It hasn't grown at all. But the town I moved to, like, they were announcing that they were getting their first fast food restaurant coming soon, a McDonald's. And they actually had car accidents when it first came in because it had two entrances, one off the street and one from the parking lot to the drive-thru. Yeah, small town. Now, they got Amazon warehouses, super Walmarts. They're nothing but a sea of houses. But it was this little farm town called Patterson, right outside of Modesto, the home place of George Lucas. And we even did once a tour of George Lucas' childhood home. But as 99 approached, this is, Star Wars fever is gaining up. Now, 1998, with this, now and then I'm living in a town, I'm living at a track home, I start mowing lawns, start getting my own money. I always wanted to have video games, and my parents had always told me we can't afford them. And I'll talk more about that in my Sonic the Hedgehog fandom, my fandom story. But this is the point where I remember we went into a Best Buy, and we got this bundle pack. And I'm trying to remember okay, I have it written down. So we had TIE Fighter, X-Wing, TIE Fighter versus X-Wing, Shadows of the Empire, Dark Forces, and of all things, Yoda's Story. Not gonna lie, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to play Yoda's Story on PC, but Shadows of the Empire was one I had already listened to the audio drama, had read the book, was just like all in on that one. And then, but the TIE Fighter for X-Men, man, my dad's computer he had to get a home computer for his new job. It could barely handle that game, but I spent hours on that game. At this point, I hadn't even gotten a home console yet. This was kind of right around that time. I saved up my money to buy a used Genesis and a used Game Boy and kind of go on my gaming journey, but my dad's computer was kind of sort of off limits, but not off limits. And so these were some of the games that I had. And, of course, also around that time, the Star Wars Trilogy arcade game came out. And so I had a couple of uncles that lived in Nevada. One lived in Reno, and a cousin in Reno that worked at the casinos. And so once a year, my dad is a minister. We go down for a religious convention for ministers, and he'd take the family with us. And then afterwards, we would go to Boomtown on our way back to California. And Boomtown is a barcade before barcade was a thing. It was kind of like an upscale thing. It had like a nice fancy steakhouse with a bar. And then you had mini golf, laser tag. It had a 4D theater. That was pretty cool. And with moving seats and stuff. But then it had an arcade area. And in that arcade area, because my uncle managed that place, I got unlimited tokens. And instead of being that kid that would go over, like my brother was like, the moment he realized they got unlimited tokens, what'd he do? He went and hit that thing that you got a bunch of tickets from, and he'd just do that until he'd get a prize. Like he'd spend a whole afternoon to get some cheapo prize that cost thousands of tickets, and just was a waste. Probably could have just asked my uncle if he could have that. My parents could have just bought it directly. But I would hog the Star Wars arcade trilogy because it wasn't cheap, but I play that over and over and over again. I'm in love. If I ever can, that is like, I have like, 3 or 4 like arcade machines that I desperately want to have in my garage. That's one of them. I would love to have that arcade.
If you will not. Standby alert. Death Star approaching.
Smart gas foils in attack position. Accelerate to attack
But 1999, I'm 14 now. Like I said, going through some of that angst, some of that thing, of the move and different things and changes happen in my life. But 1999 was all about Star Wars, like just the lead up, the build up, and being in the Modesto. Like I went and saw Phantom Menace. They're in Modesto, in George Lucas's hometown. They held parades, like it was crazy, and I just was super thrilled for this movie. Couldn't contain myself. I read 2 different book versions of this. In fact, I finished one. I was like a couple chapters, and I was like speed reading through it because I wanted to finish it before we saw the movie. And I was like, took the book in with me into the theater while we're waiting in line, reading the last chapter. So I was just obsessed with this, and that was like the young adult version that I had just acquired right before like that Friday or whatever, and we were seeing it on Saturday, and I had already consumed it. This I bought all in. Like I was doing the soda cans, I was collecting those. I had the Pizza Hut boxes. I had Taco Bell. Now we ate at Taco Bell and Pizza Hut already, but we never really ate at KFC. I was the kid, did not like fried chicken as a kid. Still not a big fried chicken person, but I really didn't like it as a kid, and I really didn't like going to KFC. My parents did because it was a bargain for the bucket, but they kind of really stopped because I wouldn't eat it, and it would be a waste for them because I would go home hungry. And I lived in a household where you had to eat the stuff on your plate. Like I ate my vegetables, I did that, but I just couldn't do fried chicken on the bone. It just was not my thing as a kid. And my parents were quite shocked as I started forcing myself to eat that just so I could get the stuff from KFC for episode 1 to collect and have in my collection. I started amassing, like I started doing the Legos, started doing everything I could, Star Wars, collecting, having multiples of them.
You refer to the prophecy of the one who will bring balance to the Force. You believe it's this boy?
He can see things before they happen.
He can help you.
The Force is unusually strong with him.
He was meant to help you.
Anakin! Tell him to take off!
Will I ever see you again?
What does your heart tell you?
Are you sure about this? Trusting our fate to a boy we hardly know?
Anakin Skywalker, meet Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I sense much fear in you.
The boy is dangerous. They all sense it. Why can't you?
Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
In the universe, the ultimate evil stirs. But 3 legendary heroes have come together and will lead the battle to save the galaxy from the menace of the dark side.
Right after lunch.
Play Defeat the Dark Side. Collect cool Star Wars game medallions and you could win cash prizes, even $1 million. Only at Taco Bell, KFC, and Pizza Hut.
Ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
Obi-Wan, we've got to save the Queen!
Where's her dad? Mr. Jar Jar Binks come for comic relief.
Emergency landing on Tatooine.
No! Pod racing is wet. Love you, Mom.
Love you, Padme.
Oh no, Darth Maul! My brains are spilling out!
Oh, joy. The end.
This is the weirdest date I've ever been on. I'm out of here.
Go you must.
Farewell. Bye-bye.
Star Wars Episode 1 cans collect all 24 this summer.
Then came 2002, Attack of the Clones. And once again, this reminded me of the Return of the Jedi special. I really hated Attack of the Clones. And I've only seen it 3 times. Twice I've convinced myself that maybe I like that movie because it does have cool moments. You think, oh, there's the fight between here or the this, that. But one of my favorite, outside of the droids, my favorite Star Wars character has got to be Vader. He's the villain that makes it all happen. And I just did not like what they did with Vader. I did not like where I was seeing the turn go. But I was holding out some hope that in the last movie that we would see some other development. And this was just his awkward years. But you have to also understand, I was having difficulty in school dealing with kids that were like this. That my, on my quest to become a minister, I was, most of my friends were in their 40s. And I'm just in high school. And so I've got these real grown-up men talking about real grown-up things, being in that conversation, much more mature, and then going to school and having people just squabble. And I ended up going on independent studies, doing high school in 2 years, which made up for the fact that, I was stunted as a youth and held back a little bit when I was younger. So I did some catching up there, but I just was tired of the whininess. And so when it was him whining on screen and it was Darth Vader, I'm like, this is not the Darth Vader of my youth. This is not this image. I couldn't, but I held out hope that in the episode 3 that maybe it would redeem it. And this was just a period. 2004 was a really big year in my life. That was when I graduated. I did traveling. I went to Canada, New York City, Hawaii. I started dating my now wife. That's when I first told her I loved her. We had a mutual respect. Did not start that way, but we had grown to have a mutual respect, and I started pursuit of her in 2004. And I much to chagrin at the time, my parents didn't approve yet. I finally got a driver's license. That was my dad's big thing. Is I was responsible in a lot of ways. I saved my money, did stuff, but I didn't have a steady job that I can move out on my own yet. Here I was pursuing a young woman, and so this caused a lot of tension. But at the same time, I did a lot of maturing during that year. Like I said, I became a young minister at the time. And then in 2005, episode 3 came out, and me and my dad were really butting heads as I was trying to find work, trying to find employment, which I did that year. I did find employment. I started working in a warehouse, making decent money and stuff, but that started off with that, and we were just kind of butting heads, whether I was ready to date, whether I was ready to move out, whether I was ready for all the responsibilities I've been taking on in my life when I wasn't able to support myself yet. And my dad got a really unique opportunity, a very special opportunity. His boss scored extra tickets to a Star Wars movie, episode 3 grand premiere at the Chinese theater. So this is not with the cast, but this is like the very next showing. And he was forcing my dad to go down to a business meeting down there in Southern California. And so kind of like the thing is like you go do this movie and then you're going to get these tickets. So, so I don't have to go do this business trip. And so my dad was all excited. He knew I loved Star Wars. My dad loved Star Wars. And, but I just remember I wanted to go out and do something with my wife. Wasn't my wife yet, but, I wanted to go on a date. And the idea of driving from Modesto down to Southern California with my dad, when we were butting heads and doing that, I said no. And some of that was episode 2. Like I was a little burnt on Star Wars. I wasn't too sure, but that might have been the first time I made my dad cry. First and only time maybe that I made my dad cry. Seriously, I felt really bad afterwards, and I realized what a huge opportunity that I missed not going to that. And and it's funny when I hear certain Star Wars fans tell me about them being in line for that movie there. I'm like, I could have been there. I could have been there. But we'll get back to that. I did eventually go, and I will say this is the first movie I ever walked out of and demanded my money back. I walked out during the scene where Anakin cuts the younglings down. I just felt the turn was unearned, and I was so upset. I was like, they didn't convince me that this was Vader, and I walked out. And I had a visceral reaction to this. Now I've watched this. So I said I see Clone Wars, or Attack of the Clones 3 times. I tell people I've seen this one 2.5 times because I didn't finish this movie the first time in the theater. So I've seen it 2 times since. I have softened greatly on this because of the Clone Wars cartoon. But I had such a visceral reaction. Now, I was getting married the next year, and I knew that we were going to be living in a very, very small, tiny house for our first place. And so I wasn't going to get to keep most of my stuff now. I was looking at putting in storage. My parents were going to store some of it. But I was just upset. So I took all my Legos that I had collected, all the sets, gave that to my brother. I sold some stuff at a yard sale, but the vast majority of it, I just loaded up the trash can. All those soda cans, all that, I just threw it all away. I'm really sad that I got rid of my Star Tours action figure collection. I got rid of all the books. Some of them I threw out. Some of them I took to a thrift store. I was thoroughly just mad at Star Wars. And I went through a period where I'm also a Star Trek fan. And so I started just, anytime somebody said they were a Star Wars fan, I'd just go into this mode where I talk about why Star Trek is so much better than Star Wars. And I was just kind of obnoxious like that. And I was really angry at the franchise. I had this vision of what I felt, how the prequels should have ended. I had this vision of what Vader's origin was. And when it didn't happen, the way I felt like George Lucas just threw the franchise away, and if he didn't care, why should I? Now, of course, he did care, but that was just how I felt. And, I said, the franchise is dead. It's dead. It'll never be back. And it's funny because I hear that said so much now. And I go, I understand where you're coming from. I was there once. What I wouldn't have given to take all that stuff I threw away and still have. But so then I didn't watch any more Star Wars. I didn't even rewatch the original trilogy. I went from that almost being a weekly thing of me watching the original trilogy in my rotation to not watching it at all. In 2008, I'm a huge fan of animation. So when they said they were going to do a Star Wars animated movie, I wanted to see what it is. I went and saw it in 2008. I was not impressed. I thought that the 3D animation looked pretty crude. I'm like, why does this not look as good as Toy Story? This is Star Wars. It should. And I didn't originally like the character of Ahsoka. I certainly didn't like Stinky, the Hutt, Jabba's son, which is supposedly going to be in the Mando and Grogu movie. Like, that's weird, because that was not... So I didn't watch the Clone Wars cartoon. I didn't watch anything else until 2012 when I heard Disney bought Star Wars. And I figured what Disney would do with the property would be kind of generic. it would be safe. It wouldn't be offensive to me, but it would probably be safe, and it would be something I would enjoy. And this actually piqued my interest up. And I remember I went from like not willing to do anything Star Wars. I didn't want anything labeled Star Wars. Didn't want to look at anything Star Wars. Even the stuff that used to bring me joy, no. And in 2012, I went back. I rewatched the original trilogy. I rewatched the prequel trilogy. That was the second time I saw those films. And I tried to watch Rebels when it came out. And at first, I couldn't get into it. And so everybody was like, no. Netflix is bringing back, just brought back Clone Wars. So I was like, okay, I have Netflix. Binged all the Clone Wars. Loved it. Went in, watched Rebels. Loved it. So, this drew me back in. Now it's time for The Force Awakens in 2015. And the local radio station was doing a contest with Dave and Briggs in the morning, KKCY. But you could win 2 tickets to see The Force Awakens a day early. So like the movie was coming out at midnight, but you could see it Thursday at 4 p.m. And so I was like, I got to do this. So I kept entering. And the last day that you could win tickets, I went in and I literally walked up, put my raffle into the basket. 5 minutes before they were going to pick out the thing, they picked me out. Some people were upset. They saw that, like, you didn't shake it well enough. But the last guy that put a raffle in is the guy that got picked out. but I was like, I'm going to take those tickets out. I'm going to run before these people try to say that they need to reshake it. And I took my dad. All those years before, I felt really bad about that, and I took my dad. And
The Force is strong in my family. My father has it. I have it. My sister has it. You have that power too. out of that movie thinking I had problems with that movie. I did not like Kylo Ren. The tantrums reminded me of Episode 2 Anakin. I was like, why are they modeling him after that? I was not happy about that. I remember the big CGI monster with Han Solo and Chewbacca just felt un-Star Wars to me. And I remember Starkiller Base just being this like huge... I was like, why is it everything's like back to the way it was before Return of the Jedi? Like, no, this isn't the expanded... But all of that aside, I felt the story was once again like I thought it would be. I thought it was safe. I thought it was following the mold of the Star Wars movies that came before it. And it left me with, well, I didn't really enjoy that movie that much. I'm like, this is the safe, like, get people over the prequels, and let's go forward. We've got a new crew. We've had the kind of Han Solo and Leia introduce them. We're going to get Luke in the next movie. But Ray, Finn, and Poe, loved their characters, loved their dynamic and interaction in the movie, and I'm like, I am ready to hear their story. And so, while I didn't really enjoy The Force Awakens, like, sharing it with my dad, having them shoot T-shirts at us out of a T-shirt cannon and all that, it was this big event. Was just real special in a way to connect with my dad. Now, me and my dad went to go see The Last Jedi, and I remember walking out of that movie and asking my dad, what did you think of it? And he says, I liked it. And he says, what do you think of it? And I go, I honestly don't know how I felt. I felt empty. Like, it felt off. I wasn't enraged. I just was like, that just didn't feel right to me. Now, I sat and thought about it. I listened to a bunch of other people talking it on podcasts and YouTube live streams. And there were some things that instantly I became defensive on. I was like, no, that's silly. You're worried about how bombs drop. Did you watch A New Hope? Like, physics don't work at all in Star Wars space. But there were other things that I was like, yeah, no. I do not like that at all. They did Luke wrong. And I'm not a big Luke fan. I was like, so I went there now, went to Rise of Skywalker. Skip Solo wasn't just, didn't draw me in enough. Didn't go. Did see it later. Didn't regret that I didn't see it in theater. Didn't regret that I saw it, but it's one, I've only seen that twice. I've only seen each of the Disney trilogy movies once. Rise of Skywalker, I remember going to the theater. I remember having a good time. I remember walking out being happy. Like, it's not the best Star Wars movie, but it was way better than the last one. And I was really glad that I felt like it fixed some of the things the last one. Now, in hindsight, I know that I actually made it a very flawed movie. I think if Colin Trevorrow's movie, which would have built upon The Last Jedi, I think would have, in retrospective, made some of The Last Jedi better. I think that would have been a better way to go. But I have not watched it again because I know I will be upset with it. I know I won't like it. But I left the theater with a good feeling, and I like to leave it just there. Rogue One, saw in theater, watched it a couple of times in there. Liked it, but now, I'm liking a lot of what's coming out, but where does this bring us to the present? And kind of the last part of what I would say, my fandom with Star Wars, like, it's everything. Like, we skipped over stuff. I had the micro machines, Jedi power bottles on Dreamcast. Like, Star Wars, such a big part of my life and my fandom. And I jokingly tell people, it's number 5 in my top 5 fandoms. And people will go, well, what are your top 5 fandoms? Well, so Back to the Future is top, so I don't count. It's above everything. But I'll always go, it's my TV fandoms are Star Trek, Doctor Who, Stargate, all tied the top 3, and then there's whatever I'm currently into and obsessing over, and then number 5 is Star Wars. Like, Star Wars never gets kicked off the list, but there's always something I'm currently obsessing over that gets put above it, whether it's Battlestar Galactica, Firefly, Red versus Blue, the DCAU, whatever it is. There's always something that I ends up in that slot, and then eventually, like, gets knocked out of my zeitgeist. Isn't something I'm bringing up all the time, but Star Wars is always solidly there in my top 5 of my favorite fandoms, and or I should say sci-fi fandoms, because if we're going fandoms overall, Sonic the Hedgehog, different. I got things that I'm a huge fan of, and of course, like I said, I'm a minister or a bit of a Bible nut. The next thing is coming on with my daughter. My daughter was born in 2016. When she was 2, almost about to be 3, we took her to Disneyland, and I took her on Star Tours. And so that was really cool. Now, I think out of that whole trip, the thing she gravitated to the most was the Finding Nemo ride. Like, that blew her out of the water. But she liked Star Tours, and she liked the Indiana Jones ride. So those were kind of like her top 3 things that she picked out there. She can barely remember it. But then, in 2019, signed up for Disney Plus, The Mandalorian, and my daughter's 3 years old, and she is instantly zipped in, and she just loves it.
Show me the one whose safety deemed such destruction. You must reunite it with its own kind.
Where?
This you must determine. The songs of eons past tell of battles between Mandalore the Great and an order of sorcerers called Jedi.
You expect me to search the galaxy and deliver this creature to a race of enemy sorcerers?
This is the way.
You know this is no place for a child. Wherever I go, he goes. So I've heard. This is the way.
You know, it's funny. I have she kind of likes Ahsoka, so she'll watch Clone Wars episodes if Ahsoka's in it. And she liked Tales of the Jedi with Ahsoka. She's not a huge into Star Wars. I can't get her into a lot of stuff. But Mandalorian, seeing Grogu and Mando, like, she is all about that. And she has to have Mandalorian everything. She's got to have Mandalorian earrings. She's got to have, Mandalorian shirts, sweat jackets, backpacks, everything with Grogu all the time. She's like really into that. And so being able to kind of follow that same steps of, wasn't the main movies. We went and saw episode 1 in theaters. I can't wait till one of the original trilogies. I can take her to that in theaters. But she thoroughly loved episode 1, loved the pod racing. But the fact that I brought her in through seeing Star Tours just like me. And it was Star Tours Continues. Yes, it had C-3PO and stuff like that. And then The Mandalorian was like her Caravan of Courage. Like, that was her introduction to Star Wars as like watching it and doing that. And she's played some games and stuff like that. And so it's just fun that I've kind of reproduced what happened with me. And, but, it's interesting because different things catch her fancy than me. Like, she doesn't have an interest in reading Star Wars books. And she's not, but, she really likes The Mandalorian and everything around that. So that's been something, and she enjoyed the Book of Boba Fett. What can I say? She was okay with that. It was funny that seeing her when Mandalorian season 2 first opened up, and the Krayt Dragon came up and it ate the cow, and I thought she was gonna be scared because she was like 4 at that point, and she was giggling. They ate the whole cow. It's just like, he ate the hairy cow, and she just thought that was like the greatest thing ever. And so, it's just been a fun journey, and now getting to pass that on to my daughter. So that is my fandom, my Star Wars story that I wanted to share with all of you here on Star Wars Podcasting Day. So, my name is Nicholas. This has been Backyard Tardis Random Thoughts Podcast, part of the Red 5 Network. I hope you all have a good day, and let me know in the comments, how did you first discover Star Wars? And I'll catch you in the next video. You got all the special
Hey,
stuff.
Nicholas with the Backyard Tardis, and we just went and saw The Phantom Menace 25 years later for the first time. Here with my dad. And the very camera shy Padawan. So it was great. Definitely this movie is much better in the theater with the surround sound, especially during the pod race, hearing all that action and reverberation. What did you think, Dad? You like
I enjoyed it. Yeah, it's much better at the theater.
Yeah. Amelia, what was your favorite part? All you got to say is what your favorite part was.
What was your favorite part?
No, I'll get her to cut that in later. Okay, got Padawan Amelia here. What? It's okay. So, who did you like the most in the movie?
The guy with the blue lightsaber.
Okay, that was Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's okay to forget his name. It's a bit of a complicated one. And then, what was your favorite part of the movie?
The pod racing.
Yeah. And did you like the movie?
Yes.
Yeah. See, I tried to show it to her a couple of years ago when she was littler. I couldn't hold her interest, but there's something about seeing this movie in the theater. It was loud, and you could feel those pod racers going around those corners, huh? Was there a lot of funny aliens in this one?
No.
No?
The only funny alien was Char Char.
Jar Jar was funny? Oh, what did you think of the big fish monster?
You mean the one that ate both of them?
Yeah, they ate the other fish monsters. I know you're a dinosaur lover. Did you like him?
Yeah, and he saved their lives.
Yep, he did. They were too small for him to be concerned with, but he wanted those other big fish.
Right?
So, are you glad we came to the movie?
Yeah.
All right. Definitely looking forward. Maybe when they get another one of the Star Wars movies for rewatch, we'll go see that.
Greetings, listener. Just a reminder that the podcast you just heard is a proud member of the Red 5 Network family. Red 5 Network offers you a great variety of shows you'll be sure to love. So the next time you're itching for quality content, make sure you head over to Red 5 Network. You'll find this podcast along with a whole lot more. All wings report in. It's the Red 5 Network.